Please say your name. So
Alan Coslow, and first I want to thank you as someone who volunteered in the first Earth Day in '69 and who organized an event in the second Earth Day. I'm very happy about your stance on climate, and there's so many things I can ask you about, but I want to get down right to the heart of the matter of why you feel you are the person of the 6 on the stage tomorrow, why you are the one that we should go with.
Well, I think the first question is, can I beat Trump? And I was trying to say, look, he beat 16 conventional Republican candidates pretty easily. He took on the most prepared Democratic candidate ever, someone who'd been First Lady, Senator, and Secretary of State, who was encyclopedic in her knowledge of policy. He is an unconventional candidate, and he reflects a different, unconventional America. And I don't believe we can beat him with conventional candidates. I think we're going to have somebody who can take him on where he lives, which is the economy, which is what I can do. That's my first point. The second point is this. I have spent 10 years asking why this country has such a broken government and what we need to do about it. And the first thing is, we can't wait on climate. I'm going to declare a state of emergency on day one because we have to. Look, think back to President Obama. His number one priority was healthcare, and he got it. His number two priority was climate, and he never got to it in terms of legislation. If it's not your number one priority, I don't believe it's going to happen, and it has to happen. That's why I say, look, the fact that I'm the only person who will say it's my number one priority, it really is true. I mean, I'm not saying this secretly behind closed doors. I say it all the time on the debate stage as well. That's the second one. But the third thing is this. We have a broken government. I believe if we take back that government and make it serve the people in this room and in rooms like this, we will get every single thing that we want. And we will have a normal debate about which healthcare system and which educational system and all the other things, but we will be able to get all of them, and that's just regular democracy. What we don't have right now is a system that is even trying to serve the people of the United States. None of these are new problems. None of them. Every other advanced country in the world has healthcare as a right. Every single one. What we do across the board, what we're doing in terms of gun violence is completely off spec for every other country in the world. You know, we have over 400 mass shootings last year. The next country with the most is like 5 in Mexico. No one does what we do. And if you look across, it really is at the bottom of every one of these issues, at the drug costs, 10 times what other countries pay. At the bottom of it is a government that's serving the corporations and not the people. So if we do those two things, take back the government and stabilize the climate crisis, actually, we're in the best position of any people in the history of the world. We will be able to guarantee a secure lifestyle for every American that's better than the people understand. That we will have rights that are observed for everyone, that we can afford and deliver on, that will make us the best placed people in the history of the world. And that's actually what I think is necessary. Number one, I'm for reparations.
Okay.
So of all of the people on, they asked a couple of the people on the last debate stage, are you for reparations? And I think that one of them said, I'm for HR 40. Nobody probably knows what HR 40 is. It's a study that's been proposed since 1990 to study reparations. I'm actually for reparations. I'm for dealing openly and straightforwardly with race. I would start a formal commission on race on my first day to retell the last 401 years of American history about the African American experience in the African American community. And I believe, excuse me? Yes, but what I believe is policy comes out of narrative. If you want to be unfair to somebody and be unjust, tell a lie about them. If you want to mistreat Latino immigrants, call them rapists and murderers so you can justify unjust treatment. So what I want to do is have a formal commission on race to retell the story of America in a true fashion, so that we actually talk about the injustice that was there, and so that people understand what happened. You know, I always say to people, we're from California. Nobody in California knows what Jim Crow was. But it happened, and it's important that people understand. But it's not just about injustice. It's about the contributions that African Americans have made to this country, and that's not just in terms of work in building the country. It's in terms of moral leadership in this country going back decades and generations and centuries. So when we talk about, I'm someone who actually believes in being extremely straightforward in this, that we understanding how we got here so we can be fair going forward and redress what's happening. So for instance, I propose something on historically black colleges and universities, $125 billion over 10 years. Multiples of what anyone else is talking about. But I'm doing it because those colleges and universities historically were the only place legally that black kids could go down south, because they were legally prevented from going to the mainline colleges and universities. They've produced over half of the African American judges, doctors, engineers, generals, and teachers. They've succeeded, and they're dramatically underfunded. So in answer to your question, look, you can look back in my history. It's not just the policies I'm talking about in terms of immigration, which I'm, have extreme policies. Kat and I started a bank 15 years ago, a community bank. It is named after, I don't know why the lights are going down. Okay, Shannon.
2 minutes.
Okay, we started a community bank 15 years ago. Kat has been the CEO. We applied for a license. It is mission driven. Economic justice, environmental sustainability, support businesses owned by women and people of color. Yay. We started it. It's over $1 billion. Every loan is measured in terms of its impact on the community, its impact on the environment. Catherine has run it. It's profitable because we have to please the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. We've funded it. We can never get our money back. We can make more loans or we can give the money away, but we did it in a way to make sure it's purely mission driven. And let me say something else, Tanya. Our campaign, over 50% people of color, over 50% women. The campaign manager is a woman. 30% LGBTQ. I don't know, Kat, do you have the numbers on the bank in terms of who works there?
63% people of color, 50% people of color and women in the C-suite, 25% people of color in the C-suite.
Okay.
So all I'm saying is this, Tanya, just so you know, we didn't just start doing this. I personally spent over $3 million hiring lawyers for people under threat of deportation, just so they get a fair treatment under the law. Just the idea that people deserve fair legal treatment. Catherine, for 35 years, we have supported a settlement house in California. I don't know if you guys know what a settlement house is, but basically it's run by our church. And the church has been welcoming people to San Francisco since 1894. It's called Good Samaritan, if you guys remember the parable of the Good Samaritan. Kat has been running it. She's been the chair of the board. It has been welcoming people from Mexico and Central America without asking their documentation. We've been involved for 35 years at a time when people were furious at us. I mean, now people in California, we're a sanctuary state. People understand it's a completely different. We have been doing this before we could spell the word president. So in answer to your question, I believe, we are committed to diversity. We are committed to open discussion of race. I talk about immigration as Mr. Trump's attempt to use immigration as race, to divide Americans and talk about it. I believe you can't let racist statements stand, because if you do, people assume that that is acceptable, and in particular, I cannot let children think that.
Yeah.
Right. So when you guys look at me, what we have seen in this race, and what I've seen for 7 years going around this country and talking to people, is suffering by Americans because of cruel policies. And just so you know, I have no intention of putting up with it. I mean, not in terms of money, not in terms of the way people get paid, not in terms of healthcare, not in terms of education, and definitely not in terms of race. That is the most un-American thing I can think of, and we need to get together and push back every single time and not compromise on it. And if you look and see, I was getting people to go back against this guy over 2 years ago because he's bad. Not some trivial little thing, because there was an evil at the center of American society. That's what you're talking about, Tanya.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, I was doing something about it. And that's my point. I've been doing this for a long time. It had nothing to do with running for president. It had everything to do with my father in the Nuremberg trials.
So if you were elected president, how would you address this epidemic, and especially how that pertains to youth and young people?
Okay. And would you remind me of your name?
Caitlin.
Caitlin, okay. So first of all, let me say that I know how painful opioid addiction is for the person and their family and their community. I think everybody in this room probably has the same experience I have had, but my best friend growing up is a dead heroin addict. So I watched the whole thing. I want to talk about the opioid crisis, and then I want to talk about mental health more broadly, but let's start with opioids. Look, I'm for legalization of marijuana. I'm for decriminalization of drug possession. I believe this is a health problem. I have said we should be spending $75 billion a year to try and address it as a health issue. I understand exactly how devastating, I mean, 72, I don't know if I have the numbers for 2019, but I know the numbers for 2018 were 72,000 opioid overdoses that year. That's more than all the American service people who died in Vietnam in all those years. That's just a humongous off the charts number. So it is a crisis that we should be dealing with, and I say we need to be realistic about how to do it. We should spend the money to do it, and we should address it specifically and try and put it in a context that's realistic, which is it's a health issue and we need to help people get off it. But let me go further than that, which is this. As Channing said, I have been going around and organizing on the ground in Iowa since 2013. And one of the times I was here, I asked someone who wanted to be the Democratic nominee for governor, what is the biggest issue in Iowa? And I had a lot of things I thought that it might be, but his answer was mental health. And I know that going across Iowa is reflective of something that's true in the United States of America, which is this is a very anxious and depressed country. And you can see it. We're in a state where they've chosen to close mental health facilities and not support the idea that mental health is health and that we should be responding to it on a real-time basis. I mean, Kat and I were talking to somebody today who is a vet who has post-traumatic stress, who went in to have an appointment, and they gave him one on May 13th. And as I like to say, if you go into the doctor with a broken leg, they never say to you, come back on May 13th and we'll settle it. We'll set it. But that is, we are underfunding mental health broadly. So in addition to the money that I would spend on opioids, Caitlin, I would spend $100 billion more per year, that's in my health plan, on mental health. Because we are not talking about it enough, we're not admitting to it, but we're in a society where for the third year in a row, life expectancy went down. And 3 of the 4 reasons that it went down were alcoholism, drug abuse, and suicide. So when you're talking to me, those to me are all code words for despair. And I look at this country and I say, we have to support Americans who are suffering because of mental health issues. And also, let me say this, I believe we've lost our way. I believe this president, with his valueless and really, in my mind, cruel attitudes, we have seen a rise in anxiety and depression since he was elected off the charts. So one of the other things that I believe about this is pain. Look, my brother called me up and said, I can't sleep, this country is blowing up and I don't know what to do about it. The other thing that's true is this, We need to reestablish why we're Americans and what we stand for. And that's an easy thing to say, but here's how I want to do it. Let's take the biggest crisis in history, the climate crisis, take it on, solve it together, and remember why we're Americans. That we lead the world in what's right. So, Lila, let me say this. One of the things that we have to do, and that this state is going to be really important to, is we're going to have to plant and grow a lot more trees all over the world. Because one of the ways that we're going to solve the climate crisis, believe it or not, is by planting a ton of new things, and particularly trees. And what I want to do on this, Lila's absolutely right. We're going to come to Iowa. And we're going to come to the parts of the state where there are big fields and farmers, and we're going to ask them, what do you think we should plant? What kind of trees? What can we do? And then we're going to pay them to do it. So actually, we're not only we're going to net, I think we're going to end up planting around the world 1 trillion trees. And we're going to need the people of Iowa specifically to tell us how to do it, and then to do it together, and then to make sure that for their services, they're well paid. Can you believe it? So you guys should know, I have been running campaigns on climate for over a decade. And the first time I did it was against 2 oil companies in California, and they'd had a similar fight 4 years before. The guy who is the supposed environmentalist spent $72 million and got creamed. So we have a very different way of talking about climate. It's changed since the beginning of 2010, just so you know. But what we said in 2010 is people will vote for clean air, they'll vote for clean water, they'll vote for clean energy jobs, they'll never vote for polar bears. So let's talk about the stuff people care about. Clean air, clean water, clean energy jobs, and how it's actually going to benefit people right now. The second, that's my first point. Now that's changed because people are starting to realize more how imminent the threat is and how direct it is, but it's still a minority of people. But let's also talk about who cares about this. There's an impression in the media that the people who care about this are basically middle-aged white people driving Priuses, if I could be rude enough to say it. But actually, if you look around the country and try and see who really cares about this, you will see that the group of people who care the most about this are Latinos. Yes, the number 2 group of people that care about this are African Americans. And the number 3 group who care about this are Asian Americans. So when we think about who's an environmentalist, who's going to go and fight and vote on this, let's remember that the media is not right in who they think about it and how they think about it. And let's also remember that if we clean up the air and water in this country and start with that, we will get climate right. If we make sure we're dealing with the communities of color, like who do you think lives in Flint, Michigan?
Right.
Who do you think lives in Newark, New Jersey? Who do you think lives in Denmark, South Carolina? Who do you think lives in the valley in California where you can't drink the water, you'll get sick, or where 2% of the kids have asthma? What we're gonna do, Dennis, is we're actually gonna rebuild and clean up America. And the second thing is this, someone outside our organization did a study of our climate plan. We do it, we have the highest percentage of unionization in America since 1945. We're talking about doing something that we have to do, which is your point. But we're also talking about something that is going to create much better paying work in the United States, unionized work, that is going to be much more just, and is going to clean up the air and water for people here so we're healthier and live longer. So when I look at this and say, we have to rebuild and reimagine America. That's when I was talking to Caitlin about mental health. We have to take on the biggest task together in history. Have to do it. We can do it. I've spent 12 years doing this. I know that we can do it. I can talk you through. You said, do I have good climate scientists on my speed dial?
Good.
Heck, climate scientists, I can talk to you about what it, ask me what it costs per kilowatt hour for the different kinds of energy. No, I've been doing this for 12 years. We have to do it, we can do it, but we have to lead the world in doing it too. That's why I said state of emergency on day one. Why does India care what we have to say about climate? If we haven't cleaned up our own pollution, why would they listen to us? So if we want to lead the world, we've got to get our house in order day one so that we can lead the world. But leading the world as Americans is what we do. That's who we are. We have to get back to the idea that America comes together in a crisis and leads the world for good. That's what this is about.
Hi, Kathy here. How are you?
Great.
Good. I grew up in western Iowa, and I've been a country mouse.
Which town?
Harlan in Shelby County. I've been a country mouse most of my life, farm communities, and I'm wondering, as you're traveling about, what you're hearing from and what you're saying to farmers as far as their part in the climate solution.
So, let me say I've been to western Iowa specifically on climate. I wanted to go to Council Bluffs. I wanted to see what the floods looked like. I wanted to talk to farmers. I wanted to talk to people who'd lost their houses to see how they thought about it and to see what they wanted. So that's my first point. Second point is this. I don't know if you know it, but Kat and I actually raise
Hi, Kathy.
grass-finished cattle, pigs, and chickens. And when I said that the person who knows the most about regenerative agriculture is not the one with the microphone, I'm telling the truth. It's the one sitting over there. But let me say that what I do mean is we are farmers. So when we talk to people who live in rural America and who raise crops or animals, I feel as if we have at least some insight. Although I must say, Iowa farmers act and work on a scale that is hard to believe. It really is. I mean, when I was not this past summer, but the summer before, I was flipping pork burgers at the Iowa State Fair, and I said, so how many animals do you have? And he told me, I was like, I gotta go. It's a lot. So my answer is this. Iowa farmers have been innovating for a long time, for decades, actually for over a century, leading the world in agriculture. When I say we're gonna come to you and partner with you and let you and decide together how best to do this, and we're gonna provide a significant new revenue stream for you, farmers like that. What farmers are terrified of is the government coming in and telling them what to do and telling them how to run their life. And I have no interest in pretending that I know more about growing things in Iowa than they do. That would be ridiculous, right? Actually, if you look at my history and if you look at Kat's history, our history is going to people and partnering with them and trying to work together and use their experience and knowledge to come up with the best solution. That is absolutely what we intend to do with the farm community, specifically in Iowa. This is not the only thing we're talking about in terms of a rural policy, but it's a critical part because this is something where Iowa farmers are going to be providing a service to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. It's going to take their expertise to do it well. We're going to rely on that, and we're going to pay them for it. So let me say this, just so you guys know. I went to Stanford Business School. I feel as if I was an econ poli-sci major in college. I feel as if I worked in business for over 30 years. I feel like I'm remotely good on finance. Kat Taylor is too haughty to even be a Stanford MBA. She's a Stanford JD MBA. We've spent years, so let me say this. I actually have information on this because California has had a carbon fee in the guise of a cap and trade system since 2006. I'm not opposed to a carbon fee. I'm not opposed to a cap and trade system. I'm happy to do them. They aren't the thing that works the best, the fastest, just so you know. because we've had a chance to see, we've tried every single thing. We do everything. You know, we have rules, we've had rules since 1970 on building codes. You know, we have tried everything because we've had every kind of pollution. You know, we like to say we like to lead. We're the most polluted state in the world. So we put in rules. And we have a chance to see when we put on rules what happens. And we put in a carbon fee, what happens. The answer is, it's been okay. But it hasn't driven change that fast. So in fact, am I for it? Sure, I'm for it. But when I look to how we're actually going to change things, I actually believe in rules by the government. We are going to produce energy thus and so with this much clean energy by this date. That's what one thing I believe in. We're going to produce these kinds of cars this fast by this date. Boom. And you're going to clean up, we're going to rebuild buildings by this date so we're energy efficient. When you think about what we have to do, it's actually a fairly straightforward framework. We need to clean up energy generation, electrify everything, because if you electrify things and plug into a coal plant, not so great, right? And then we need to increase energy efficiency. So there are going to be a whole bunch of things we need to do. The great thing about a carbon tax is that it goes everywhere and it works mysteriously. But honestly, one of the reasons I said the thing I said about Stanford Business School is it's a classic Stanford Business School answer. If I were 28 years old, I would be all in on a carbon tax. I really would, because it's the kind of thing they say. I can tell you that in the real world, actual rules produce answers faster and cleaner and more clearly.
So just because people ask all the time and then they'll say, oh, well, you know, we're only 15% of the emitters in the United States,
Yes.
so...
How are we going to do the world?
Right, and how...
That is the
yeah.
look, and let me just back up that question, because that is the critical question. I completely
Right, and
agree with that.
everybody's criticizing us, like how
How
come
are
we're
we gonna
making
do this?
such a big deal?
So let's start, just put some numbers on this. We have 237 coal plants in the United States of America. We've closed 290. Coal plants don't make any sense. Forget pollution, forget the fact that there's huge health issues, forget climate. They don't make any sense because it's too darn expensive. And we're going to close the 237 in the next 5 to 10 years and replace them with something. There are 1,500 coal plants in the world. There are plans to build 1,200 more. That's why this question is critical. We build 1,200 more coal plants, it's game over. Okay, so let's talk about how the United States actually leads. I've been saying we need to lead the world. We're the only country that has the moral stature, the financial strength, the technological skill, and the commercial oomph to make this happen. So how do we actually do it? That's why I've said you declare a state of emergency on day one. How do we go to China, India, Brazil, Turkey, Poland, and say, please do the job for us so we can continue polluting? How do we say that? That makes no sense. Why would they ever listen to us? That's why I say it's an emergency. We have to get our house in order on an emergency basis so that we can go to them and say, we will help you make this transition with us. We will lead the world. And if we haven't done state of emergency, if we haven't said priority one, if it isn't the priority in our foreign policy, it ain't gonna happen. But you know something? They're not stupid. And if you look at those countries and the amount of suffering they are facing in the near term, if you look at what's going on in Australia, if you just look at what's going to happen in Asia, if you look at the numbers in India and China, we actually have all of the right on our side. We just need to put ourselves in a position where we're not the egotistical, bullying, selfish, America first country that this president has tried to claim we are, and go back to the moral, value-driven, democracy, freedom, equality, justice-loving country that we really are, so that we can go to the rest of the world and say, we know we need to do this ourselves, and we're doing it, and we want to help you do this with us so that we all don't suffer.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Ian's right. Look, I think he's actually making a critical, essential point. So my mom was a teacher, and I want to say, Mr. Trump's understanding about prosperity misses the point that education is actually the means for future prosperity and success for Americans this age. And that the only way we're going to get that is by having a completely different attitude towards teachers, because they're really the stewards of the future, which means we have to pay them differently, but much more than that, we need to treat their role completely differently. And we have to think about education in a completely different way, as an education in the success of young people around this country, which is the success of this country. Which, if you really want to talk about growth and prosperity, it's not tax cuts for the richest people and the biggest corporations. It's actually investing in people across the country. And we're not just talking about prosperity. We're also talking about equal justice, that we can't have schools where if you're from a low-income neighborhood, you have a school with very few dollars. And if you're from a high-income neighborhood, you get a lot more dollars. That is so unjust.
Yes.
The other thing that's true about education, and that people don't talk about, is this. Education is mobility. The Horatio Alger story that anybody can go as far as he or she can carry themselves on their abilities and their hard work and their ambition is not true if the schools don't support them in their ability. And so when you look at mobility in this society, it is at a dead halt. Just so you know, I was in Georgia, and if you're in the bottom quintile of income, if your family is in the lowest fifth, the chance that you move out of the lowest fifth to the next lowest or any of the other income levels in society is 1 in 20. That means there is no mobility in this society, and it comes back to Ian's point that we're not adequately educating people in our society and giving them a chance to succeed. And their success is our success. If a kid here in Des Moines gets a great education and succeeds, it's great for him or her, it's great for their family, it's great for Des Moines, it's great for us in California. The United States is better off, we're better off. And the same thing for a kid in Compton, California. If she or he succeeds, it's great for everybody in Des Moines. That's a successful society. That's the society we're trying to build. And that's what actual prosperity and growth is. And that's what Mr. Trump will never in a million years understand. Because to him, this is just a cost to be minimized. It's not an investment with an incredible payoff, human and monetary, for the next 100 years. Let me say this. Okay, one last question. You ask a short question, I'll give you a short answer. They're gonna throw us all out of here.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so I am an HBCU senior, so thank you for knowing the statistics on that. And because of that,
What school?
Oakwood University. So because of that, I was able to actually go to Silicon Valley and intern out there. And it was really interesting when I was out there, I heard a lot of ads for vaping in particular. And so my question for you kind of addresses the over a quarter of high schoolers last year were vaping. So what is it that you would do if elected to address that issue in particular?
And what's your name?
Gianna.
Gianna. So it's not what I would do, it's what I've done. When we passed the $2 a pack cigarette tax, we also passed it on vaping. And we've moved to have 21 to buy tobacco products, including vaping. And you know, people came to me at the time and said, you're being unfair, that vaping is a smoking cessation device. It's a way to get off smoking. And I took it seriously, because I didn't want to have the actual law be wrong. We were passing a law. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Then why are the vaping devices bubblegum flavored and put in the kids section of the convenience stores? It's clear, you know, these tobacco companies have a history of trying to hook underage kids. And obviously that's what's going on. So I would do exactly what I've done in California and push for the exact same things to try and protect kids. Woo. I want to add on to what Channing said. I have a very simple attitude about how I relate to people. I played on teams my whole life. that's how I relate to people. I like to relate to people as teammates. And that's actually a very deep bond. If you play in a team with somebody, then you have to have their back, and you expect them to have your back. And what I've seen, I view the American people as my teammates, period. And the one thing I could not stand when I was playing sports is for someone to go by and kick my teammate in the face when they aren't looking. And I see it every single day. Every single day, and it makes me crazy. So I can tell you, I will stand up for my teammates, period. I am asking you to support me because I want the right to, without any compromise or hesitation, to stand up for the American people. I promise you that I will do that without any holdback, 100%. I don't have divided loyalty. It's just like a team. I'm not wondering who I'm for. I'm not. But I need support in order to do it, and I'm asking for it because I promise you, that's my attitude. I have seen cruelty to Americans that I refuse to accept across the board. And I want to go back and win and fight for the American people, and that means you guys.
Let's hear for Tom Steyer. Tom is going to stay around, so chat with him, get your picture.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like this political content, please consider subscribing.